Hello, everyone. Welcome to the September edition of our show and tell session. Thanks for taking roughly the 45 minutes out of your day to go on this journey with us and hopefully get inspired. My name is Navarra. I'm the culture director at Future Snoops, and I'll be moderating our discussion today. Um, you can get on the next slide. As always, we love hearing from you, so feel free to chime in the chat on how you feel about the subject. We'll also be sending out a recording of this session as well as some of the links shared afterwards. And then to talk about some of the upcoming events that we have coming up, I'll hand it over to Ellie.
Hello, everyone. Hi, Navarra. So I just want to quickly spotlight an upcoming event. On the 30th of September, we'll be hosting the next session in our webinar series, Returning to the Creator Within, a Community Reimagined. And this series is all about exploring the power of community in unlocking creativity. So how reconnecting with your core self can transform your work, your vision, and your impact. So if you'd like to join, just head over to futuresnoops.com/events or click the resource button in your Zoom toolbar to register. But that's it from me. Back over to you, Navarra, to kick off the September show and tell.
All right, great. So to give you a little bit of background, the premise that we've been trying out for these show and tell sessions so far is we'll pick a topic and bring together a cross section of teams from FS to explore it from all different sides. So today, the topic that we're gonna break down is nostalgia. We thought it would be a really timely topic for back to school, but also feel like it's become way too pervasive to ignore. The genesis of a lot of why wanted to talk about nostalgia is so my team, we put together this really big culture calendar that kind of acts as a guide for inspiration to look out for and licensing opportunities for people to look out for as well. And I have to say, this list that we've been keeping is getting really, really unwieldy because we also now have to consider certain pop culture holidays, like, there's Mean Girls Day, different anniversaries of popular properties, whether they're movies or albums. So, like, for example, with movies, if you look at, I was like checking out movie listings the other day, at least like in New York, any theater you look at listings for, the majority of those movies showing are either sequels of decades old movies. So, like, I think this summer, the movies that did really well were like Final Destination, and then Freakier Fridays been doing really well, which I actually saw the other day and I actually really enjoyed. Or they're like complete remakes or anniversary re-releases. The big ones that we saw this summer, I feel, were the 30th anniversary of Clueless and then the 25th anniversary of In the Mood for Love. And not only were they released in theaters, but they also came with this whole slew of like activations, different products, different experiences. And the thing is, like, we can probably expect for this to happen again for these movies in 5 years. So as much as I personally enjoy revisiting these really iconic formative experiences for me, all of this kind of made me wonder, have we reached peak nostalgia? And is this coming at the expense of true invention or really dealing with our present times? So anyways, feel free to let us know how you feel about all this in the comments, but to unpack all of this today, we have Peter from our youth section, Nicole and Jane from kids, Mallory from beauty, Blake and Kristen from our home team. And then we also have Layla, my lovely teammate on culture. Layla, did you want to add anything else from the the culture perspective?
For sure. Like you said, I mean, I'm sure we've all seen nostalgia pop up everywhere, whether it's music, movies, fashion, or more. And I think for a lot of us, it's starting to feel like nostalgia is all that we really have. And I think this article um,
I'm trying to figure out how to share it, but I am one
No
second.
worries.
In here.
Oh, okay. So, but I think this article, it's from The Atlantic. I believe it's called, Is This the Decline of American Pop Culture? Something like that. And it basically talks about how a lot of culture critics feel like this is the worst era of pop culture and argues that algorithms and this kind of over-reliance on older media is kind of tainting our exposure to new content and preventing us from creating new moments. So, with that, I feel like I've personally been paying attention to some things that feel nostalgic, but maybe serve a new purpose or help us in navigating modern issues. So, for example, we're seeing a lot of the 2010s come up right now as a point of inspiration, but it seems to be more than just an aesthetically influenced thing. But of course, we're seeing it in fashion and whatnot. But young people are also kind of leaning into this millennial cringe attitude too, which I feel is almost helping them free themselves identity-wise and kind of embrace a weirder side, which I think is really important right now, as a lot of young people feel this pressure to be perfect, especially online. And then we're also kind of seeing this old internet come through as well, with platforms like TikTok and Instagram introducing new school community features that feel like early Facebook days, allowing students a chance to kind of engage more intimately with peers, which of course can be super hard these days, as kids are isolating themselves more and kind of sticking more to their screens. And then in music, we're seeing a lot of these artists' websites keep coming up that are, of course, leaning into this old internet aesthetic, but I think it's also getting at something real where they're kind of getting a chance to show a peek into their creative process and what inspired like certain songs to come to life. And I feel like that's something definitely getting lost in music today. It's kind of become a lot more superficial. So again, kind of this mix of old, but also giving us something of substance to navigate modern life.
I always love to talk about some of these nostalgic touch points with Layla because we kind of like approach it from different sides. Where she's a lot of times just discovering it, or and then I'm just like, why are people into that? So, anyways, sorry, just kind of getting my this together. Um, sorry, my notes are all jumbled. Okay. Anyways, I think Layla, your perspective and everything you shared, I think it's a good segue into some of the topics that Peter from our youth team put on the Miro board. This is like I was telling Layla, for me personally, as someone who lived through Y2K the first time around, I've been wondering just when this trend is ever going to end. Like Layla said, I do feel like we're kind of starting to explore like different sides of the Y2K thing, somewhat a little bit more recent, going a little bit further back into the 90s. On this board here, I popped in some of the things that we've been seeing in culture campaigns like the Gap Cat's Eye commercial set to Milkshake, this new Vera Bradley one that kind of throws back to what it feels like a more carefree, less kind of self-aware time. So Peter, from your perspective, is this just a sign that it's like millennials calling the shots and they're the ones like dredging up these things again? Or do you think these nostalgia plays actually resonate with Gen Z? I also see that you posted an article about nostalgia bait. So, what's kind of your whole take on all of this?
Well, first of all, I'm really excited for this conversation. I feel like we've, at the youth team, we've treated Y2K as like a dirty word for the longest time because it's certainly one that kept popping up and we almost became like desensitized to it by hearing it so much. But I think the broader conversation around nostalgia is so important. I think people claim that nostalgia is the antithesis to anxiety, and in our kind of uncertain, pressured world today, I think people are definitely craving that positive view of the past. Of course, we know that nostalgia activates these feelings inside of us that are tied to things like comfort and safety and identity. And I think I was thinking about this. We have, remote working and long distance relationships, friendships, geographically dispersed families. So I think it's almost like we're craving that kind of shared culture, where we can kind of relate to one another through these like shared glimpses of the past. And I think that is really meaningful. But in terms of the broader kind of fashion landscape, I dropped an article here that I believe will be shared with everyone after today's session. But it seems like a lot of the major fashion houses are in this cycle of kind of reissuing their archival hero pieces as part of their new collections, a re-edition renaissance, if you will. We know that this took off in like a major way with the Prada re-edition series a while back, but then we're seeing things like the J'adore Dior t-shirt that was part of John Galliano's 2001 spring summer collection, and now it's having a major return, the way that we're seeing the return of the Paddington bag at Chloe. So I think here's where we're talking about like nostalgia as strategy, and it's really interesting that Gen Zers online are calling this category low risk luxury, which is really interesting to me. Of course, the success of these reeditions is almost guaranteed. The whole kind of mindset there is it works because it worked already before. But like you were saying before, I've yet to see Freakier Friday, but I'm really excited. But I think this is the kind of same sentiment that's fueling all of those like fashion collaborations between brands and TV shows and toys and games and movies that people grew up with. Like your, Jean-Paul Gaultier and Bratz or Balmain and Barbie. I feel like it's definitely a through line where consumers are looking for those products that almost feel like, I don't know, like cultural memorabilia or something.
Do you feel like this is kind of killing originality, or do you feel like you're seeing Gen Z take a lot of these references and really reinvent them? Or I don't know, like, are there any examples that you've pulled here or that you've seen about like any designer that's doing nostalgia in like a particularly interesting way?
I think it's really interesting. There's a lot happening. I mean, the thing about Gen Z is you can't really dictate anything to them. Whatever you give them, they'll kind of find a way to put their own spin on it, and do it on their own terms. So that is really interesting to me. But I think, it's just the way with fashion it is, always referencing itself and the past. And I think that's what's so exciting about even like this reshuffle that we're having with, different creative directors, is that you're always excited ultimately to see how they're going to dig into the archives and what they're pulling out and what they're shifting. To pick just one example would be really, really difficult, but it's really interesting to see. I don't know, I find myself when I go on Instagram and I look at if a brand drops a collection, I'm never looking at their actual main Instagram feed. I'm looking at their tagged photos because I'm always interested to see how the Gen Zers are styling them, wearing them, all these new pieces. So there's something to be said about the kind of consumer interpretations of all of these nostalgic pieces.
I'm kind of trying to go back to like whenever it's younger and when I first discovered vintage. And for me, like having that original, authentic old item was really important. And while I do really kind of admire these people who are reinventing these old touch points, do you feel like like the Gen Z consumer still wants that like authentic old thing, or are they open to like kind of these reinventions or like just these new interpretations of the past?
I think they're definitely, I mean, of course, the original pieces, Gen Z are very good. We know the way they shop, they, love to do their research. They love to do their homework online and look at as many different platforms and find the best possible piece that kind of fits their criteria. And I think that's why platforms like The RealReal and Depop and all of those kind of resale platforms are doing so well, is because all the kind of niche curations do really well with Gen Z when they can actually find the OG pieces. And we're actually seeing this boom of these Instagram accounts that would post archival designer pieces. And it's really funny in the comments how for some Gen Z, these kind of iconic designs, they're seeing them for the first time. So they're reacting to them like they're a new thing. So that's another conversation that we keep having of what actually inspires Gen Z. Is it the new or the newly relevant? And I think that's a really interesting kind of way of looking at it. But yeah, definitely. I think, the original pieces always do better and there's more demand there.
There was an interesting article in Vogue that I don't think I put on the board here the other day where they had a bunch of like kind of this similar roundtable people just kind of going through how they think nostalgia might evolve. And one thing that really stuck with me was like this idea of like, and especially like pertinent to Y2K, is like if we're bringing back these silhouettes and styles, can we make them in better fabrics at least? And the thing that I'm seeing is like, they're still making them in like this really unflattering like polyester that snags, or for example, can we make it more sustainable? I don't know, are you seeing anybody in the market that is kind of like reinventing the fit or improving it rather than rehashing it?
Let me have a think about that. I might have to come back to you on that one because I feel like what's really interesting with Y2K is I feel like just Y2K as it is doesn't really sell too well. I feel like it's always like a main collection, and then when you look through, you can spot like, oh, there's like a super low rise jean, or maybe they sprinkle in a baguette bag. I feel like they're trying to cater it to Gen Z in a way that still feels maybe a bit more tasteful than when it came around the first time around. But I'll definitely drop in some examples so people can go explore on the board. But I feel like the designers, especially the emerging designers out of London, always tend to kind of incorporate some elements of Y2K, which is really interesting. And I think now is a really good time to be looking out for the new shows that are about to come through for women's wear, just to see how much people are really tapping into that Y2K energy that we see coming through on social media.
Yeah, I'm actually just more interested for myself. So you're not
I'll send you
listening.
my recommendations.
So anyways, I think it's interesting as maybe a counterpoint to get an even younger perspective, and kind of speaking to, this everybody's going back to school right now, especially in the Northeast. So I'm interested in kind of getting the kids' perspective. I laid out a couple interesting things that we're seeing in culture right now. Like for example, this I definitely recommend once we send out these links to take a look at this Washington Post article. That's kind of taking a survey of like how schools are doing that have banned phones. And they're actually seeing pretty positive results, which I think is encouraging, with and seeing kids move towards more analog activities at school, like board games, crafts, and things like that. And then in lieu of like smartphones, Home actually has posted this too, so I'll let Blake and Kristen talk about this later. But I did think that it was interesting that this tin can landline that came out, that's kind of styled after tin cans, which I think is really cute. Um, but anyways, just going back to the kids team, are you actually seeing, I think, this more analog um, shift play out in the kids market yet? Or do you feel like this is just kind of like a gimmick or an anomaly?
Um, Definitely not. I think it's not a gimmick. I think nostalgia in kids wear has always had its place. I think maybe even more so than a lot of other markets. Jane and I were chatting about this the other day, but especially because, in kids wear, there's so much emotional connection when you're buying for a kid. I think when we all kind of just like think back to our childhood, there's always, that one item or accessory that is kind of in our core memory from childhood. Like I know I distinctly remember my Charlotte Hornets back to school windbreaker, not because I was from Charlotte or played basketball, but because I loved, that turquoise and purple. So I think when people, from the time they're shopping for their baby or their friend's baby or a grandchild, they're instantly drawn to, nostalgic items. So something that maybe reminds them of their childhood or when they were raising kids. And so I think, you know, all of these things we're seeing like return to, games like Connect Four or Uno or chess or checkers, or, the return of the landline. It's all this kind of wanting to like relive the past, whether it's through, apparel or accessories or games, as you kind of form this like new connection with this like new generation. Jane, do you have anything that you want to add?
Yeah, definitely. Again, when we were talking about this between ourselves recently, we were kind of thinking about who the nostalgia belongs to when you're talking about kids wear, because when the kids are like, 5, 4 and under, they're not really playing any role in the shopping. It's their parents. And so it's appealing to the parents and what they see as nostalgic. But then as kids start to get older, and kind of how you were asking about to Peter Navarra, if it's like, does Gen Z really care about like the new, or is it just new to them? And so just looking at kind of whose nostalgia is it? Where are you pulling it from? Do we like these items as the adults for kids because it reminds us of our childhoods and while things were a bit more analog for us as well? Or is it for the kids themselves?
And I think, now that we are starting the back to school season, I know Jane's been, since the summer, been working on the back to school reports. And I've personally been dealing with like back to school, sending my 5-year-old to kindergarten yesterday. It's a very like emotional time. People are excited, anxious about back to school. There's a lot of stress for parents because, they have to stick within certain budgets, but there's a lot of things to buy, whether it's like new school uniforms or new items, backpacks, lunch boxes. So, like, kind of with all this emotion, it still, triggers very much their back to school experience, as well as kind of like Jane said, like figuring out, especially for the older kids that have an opinion on what they want to buy, what is something that both the parents can agree on and the kids, because I know I've had many discussions about, like Minecraft backpacks versus this like cute little checkered backpack that I want my son to bring. So I know this is something that we're seeing in the kids market with how to kind of balance what caregivers and parents want their kids to buy and what kids want. And so many times we see like it might be this really cute, like nostalgic Letterman jacket, but it might have like, say, a Spider-Man applique or a gingham dress with like a Peppa the Pig graphic. So it's this continuing like definition of nostalgia, who it belongs to, making both like parents and kids kind of feel confident and ready for like the back to school season.
Hey, Layla, can you zoom in a little bit more on these graphics? I wanted to see. And again, we'll be sharing some of these. I think you bring up a good point in that, I mean, as we can assume, parents or the people who are making these purchases being more of the audience for this nostalgia. But yeah, like, like I think Peter brought up a good point before in that it kind of gives us an opportunity to share between generations, and it fosters discussions like that we're having right now. And obviously, if you have to sit through like YouTube or a movie with a kid, you want to also enjoy that movie. I know Nicole and I have had a lot of discussions about Transformers and how it transcends generations. So very happy that Transformers is still relevant.
No, I know. I think the culture team had a great report where it talked about, and Peter mentioned like the shared nostalgia and how, as like kind of mundane and rote as it may seem to have like all of these reboots of movies, again, it is kind of the shared experience for millennials and, Gen Alpha kids where, they had a reboot of The Karate Kid. I was around for the original. My son is there for the whatever sixth rendition of it. But again, it's shared content. It is still, time spent with your child. And so I do think that, the next Toy Story is coming out, which I think the original came out, 20 years ago. So there's another one coming out in 2026. So it kind of like continues this opportunity for these shared cultural experiences.
I love that you brought that up, Nicole. And I also wanted to call out like we always talk about this loss of tween culture and all of that. And I feel like this nostalgia bent kind of gives it a little more space for kids to have their own culture too. So I think this is super cool.
I agree. Also, Nicole, it was 30 years ago, the original Toy Story. So I wish it was only 20 years.
No,
I
30,
know. I
no.
just dropped a link in the chat of a creator I love on TikTok that I think speaks to the kind of weird balance of a desire for nostalgia from your own childhood as a parent and like how your kid wants to express themselves in the world. Everyone should go check her out. She styles her daughter in the cutest thrifted 90s clothes, and like some of the stuff that her daughter has, like I had, it's like crazy. And I don't know where she's thrifting it because it's all like mint condition, and like she's doing a great job, so highly recommend.
Right. On that note, I wanted to move on to Mallory and kind of
Oh,
get into
okay.
as you spoke of. So for me, I mean, in terms of beauty, like the classic image I have pertaining to nostalgia when it comes to beauty is like the Caboodles kit and like bright, colorful makeup. And I feel like a lot of what you put down in here kind of like resonates with that. So I'm like thrilled that, this look is, happening right now. It's just joyful. It doesn't look like, anyone's taking themselves too seriously. What's kind of, can you take us through this and what you think the reasoning is behind why people are kind of gravitating towards this more exuberant look? And then also want to know if you're seeing this across different age ranges.
Definitely. So, there is so much to unpack here with beauty. If you caught our Future of Beauty report or webinar, we had a topic called the toyification of beauty, which speaks to this. If you go scroll to the bottom right image, yeah, that one. This was kind of the hero image we had for that topic, and this is the Essence and Polly Pocket collection. This exemplifies a lot of kind of the bulk of what we've been seeing in terms of the expression of this nostalgia trend within beauty. We've seen a lot of collaborations with 80s, 90s, early 2000s, like pop culture, media properties that are speaking to a very specific time of nostalgia. So we've seen a ton of that. The Bratz Body Mist just was dropped a few days ago with notes of plastic doll. So interesting to see how that will be expressed through the Accords, but definitely pulling on that strong nostalgia there, but recognizing that its audience is a bit grown up. I think in terms of the cartoon collaborations we've been seeing, it's drawing on a lot of desire for collectability. As kids, we had that desire. We always wanted like the full toy set. We wanted everything, and we've not lost a bit of that as adults. We still want this kind of limited edition packaging. Beauty brands are really savvy of that. So like, especially with like the Polly Pocket, it had a bunch of like interactive elements that were like the play sets that we used to have. So I think it's drawing on, the kidult movement where we have, our own disposable income as Gen Z, millennials, Gen Xers, and we kind of want to buy those toys that maybe we wanted more of for ourselves as kids. And what better way to do it than with beauty, a product category that we interact with every day on some level, and wellness as well. Aside from these cartoon collaborations, another thing that I really want to point out is this idea of turning beauty products into the toy itself. So if you go to the upper right-hand corner, yep, that one. So this is by a brand called All Kinds. We love this. They do body care for, ostensibly it's for kids, but anyone can buy it, of course. This is those waffles, that's a bath sponge, and that body gel is meant to smell like maple syrup. And they have so many fun food inspired textures. This is, of course, where you get a lot of the foodie fun. It's a lot of it's like dessert, very sweet. And so it's drawing on those very kid-like impulses for something sweet, something fun, something that feels special, like a treat. And I just love how it's turning just taking a shower into this really fun kid-like experience. We all remember when we were kids, everything from multivitamins to your shampoo. They always had like a special kid feel to them, whether there was a cartoon character on it or a really fun, like foodie dessert like scent or bright colors to appeal to kids. And so I love that we now live in an era where, adult beauty brands are also taking advantage of this. We have a lot of fun, like whipped cream like textures and such. And frosting like body butters. So definitely leaning into that is something that we've seen, turning the beauty product into a toy itself. If you zoom out, sorry, we're zooming all over the place, and go to the glow in the dark in the bottom. Yeah. So this is another area that we've seen the nostalgia movement, keychain beauty. Keychain beauty is everywhere. The charmification of beauty. You can see that on the right as well with the Squishmallows collab. Again, Squishmallows, they're a toy in and of themselves. So it's a beauty product that's a keychain that's inspired by a toy. It's got everything there. It's also food inspired. The glow in the dark one is by Simi Hayes. Love their brand. And so again, this is just a fun way of, kind of tying into that charmification of beauty moment, while also being really fun. With the Odell and Susan Alexandra, she's known for her beaded accessories, and she teamed up with Odell to do this dry shampoo. So I love that. If you scroll out a little bit, where's the scroll bottom left, the colors by Number Nails. We also love, again, turning beauty into the toy itself. How fun is this? These are press-on nails. They come with your own little markers, and you can color in the lines, just like a coloring book. I mean, how genius is that? I can't believe no one has done this before. If they have, maybe it hasn't been executed as well, but this is like peak nostalgia. It's like harkening back to a time when we would all have coloring books and we would get to draw outside the lines, inside the lines, whatever we wanted to do. But now we're grown-ups, and so we have a little bit of fun for our nails. Yeah, and also Miniverse, if you go just to the right, we're seeing minis take off as well. Miniverse debuted their beauty collection a while ago with completely mini but completely functional, like eyeshadow palettes, bath gels, lipsticks. Again, they were fully functional. So like you got to play with them in a very miniature kid-like way, but now they've dropped a perfume collection as well. So mini perfumes. I mean, there's so much to say. I could keep going. But yeah, we're seeing at the heart of it, we're seeing a desire just to play. That still has not gone away, to connect with our childhood and just to make ourselves happy.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of these, like I also kind of maybe falling in the kids team, like obviously it doesn't matter if you're a boy or girl, you can use these products or be interested in them. But I also wonder, we're seeing young men get more interested in wellness and beauty and all these products, but do you see like kind of any, I just kind of wonder what like that licensing play looks like for like a young men's product. Is it like soccer balls or I don't know, have you seen anything out in the market that kind of gets at the young men's market?
Yeah, for sure. I've seen, I mean, there have been plenty of these cartoon collaborations that have been inspired by like Hot Wheels and, kind of the more traditional male nostalgia, as well as video games, numerous video games, that could easily be licensed and appeal more to, more traditional male nostalgia. So yeah, there's a ton. It's not quite being expressed. I mean, I think there's still a desire by your mature male beauty and wellness consumer for like very, not so much these like very, colorful cartoon collaborations, but I think the desire still exists. I mean, I don't think this is a gendered conversation so much. We all have nostalgia. Actually, I just read a recent statistic when I was doing research for the toyification of beauty that it's adult consumers that are keeping like toy sales afloat right now, which is hilarious. And buying for themselves. That want to make that clear, not buying for their kids, buying for themselves was the statistic. So that's very interesting. I also wanted to shout out to this question in the chat about how this branding, this very colorful kid branding, seems to be a sharp turn from maybe more minimalist styles. And do those beauty consumers exist in the same world? Yeah, they exist in the same person. We contain multitudes. I think there are very categorized beauty consumers. Sure, there's those beauty consumers that love to like play and experiment and be very bright, colorful. And then there's the more minimalist. But you also have within the same beauty consumer, maybe you have those products that you keep on your very curated millennial bathroom vanity, but then you just can't resist the Polly Pocket collection because we're all kids inside and we want to play, so you pick that up for yourself. So I think they definitely exist at the same time.
I also feel like it's really interesting for a while. What I think it might be the case with beauty brands is, the kind of sleek, minimalistic packaging was really kind of like trying to set the product aside as, we're pros. This is like a pro formula. We're like a reliable brand. But I think consumers have become more savvy than that, and they don't really need to be like told exactly what it is. A brand that I love is Trixie Cosmetics, and it's by the famous drag mogul Trixie Mattel. And the whole kind of catch there is they call it pro formula in toy packaging, which I think is really interesting. So I feel like there's definitely a lot of that happening. I'm sure, Mallory, you see heaps of this, but it's so interesting to see how those two can like live in the same universe.
For sure. And I feel like there's kind of almost like nostalgic packaging that isn't immediately clear that it's nostalgia. Like, for example, Flower Nose is growing on TikTok. It's Chinese based makeup brand, and they're known for their very elaborate, very like romantic, girly packaging. They just came out with like a dessert line that they all look like cakes. And so because it's not like a 90s cartoon character, you don't immediately clock that like, oh, this is nostalgia. But if you look at that like sweet cartoon inspiration, the very thematic, it looks like a toy. So it's just toys for adults with a adult function, like with eyeshadows and such inside. And yeah, Nicole, love JB Scrub. Definitely we're seeing a lot of beauty brands for teenage boys, Gen Alpha boys. We know that Gen Alpha boys are obsessed with luxury fragrance, which is not something I could have seen coming when I was when I was 12 years old. But yeah, it's there's a lot of market opportunity there for sure.
Yeah, I feel like it doesn't matter what age you are, we all need a little fun and play in our lives, as I feel like the lesson I'm taking away from this. Kind of switching over to home, if Leila, you can share the Miro board. Nostalgia, I think just kind of like it's peeking over at what Blake and Kristen put on this board. Nostalgia looks to be a lot more about kind of comfort and going back to these tried and true things, because as we know, like things probably in the home have a longer shelf life, and it's maybe more about like longevity, staying power. Like our team has talked a lot about this yearning for comfort, and a more simple life amidst all this volatility that's going on, which we have these recent seasonal forecasts and macro screenshot here that speak to this. For home, are you seeing this sentiment play out too? Can you speak to like how nostalgia is taking shape across the home category?
Yeah, absolutely. If you zoom in, I could speak to some of the things that we're seeing within home. We're seeing two ends of the spectrum. Over here, this is really our overall aesthetic that we're seeing shape home. A lot of 1960s and 1970s influences coming through. This is your adult audience, and like you said, Navara, the home is really where we have to think about longevity a lot more. But it's definitely influencing a lot of the colors that we're seeing, the shapes that are coming into play, a lot of the material usage. So right off the bat, if you look at all of these images as a whole, you could definitely see that a lot of warm, earthy tones are coming through, your ochres, your mustards, your avocado greens, walnut browns coming through, but we're also having those fun pops of color. I love this magenta and the teal that's coming through. We're also seeing a lot of tactile richness, again, to enhance that overall comfort feel. So we're seeing a lot of velvets and corduroys come through for upholstery and different textiles in that realm. We're also seeing a ton of your traditional patterns come through. So a lot of plaids, stripes, geometrics that nod to those decades, but they're done so in a fun new way with the use of color and some of their proportions and things along those lines. We're seeing a lot of chunky furniture come through, low slung furniture. We're also seeing a lot of reissues of classic designs. So this is coming through with sofas and chairs and lighting. We're definitely seeing these revamps come through in all categories within the home. And overall, it's very sophisticated, but it still has that playful side to it. And it really leans into that nostalgia without being overly kitschy so that it can live within the home for, years to come. But when we look at the kids side of the spectrum, so looking into kids' bedrooms and kids' corners and things like that, it's a completely different vibe. So I know, Navarra, you touched on the tin can landline phone, which is something that we're loving in home right now. It is this phone that is meant for kids. It's shaped like a tin can. It has the coil cord that we all remember from our landline phones growing up. And it's really meant for those years of no smartphone, whatever that may be for the individual kid, but it's for the kids that still want to be able to communicate with their friends, but they're not ready for a smartphone with addictive elements and limiting screen time and social media. So it really strips the device back to its analog origins so kids can independently call friends and family. It has a lot of safety features in mind. So it actually has an app that's meant specifically for the parents only, and the parents can then approve who they can and cannot contact. They have do not disturb settings for quiet time and things like that. So it allows the guardians to have peace of mind while also allowing the kids to have that sense of freedom in a very safe way. And it really, it throws back to, 80s or 90s nostalgia. And something else we're loving about this revival of this landline phone is how you could really incorporate like landline calling corners into your spaces, as you could see with these 3 images on the bottom. So you could add a really fun chair or sofa. You could display your kids' artwork, and it just becomes this really fun place to socialize, but also incorporate it into the design of the space as well. So we're loving that. And then one other thing that I saw this morning actually was Zara Home's new back to school campaign, which again leans heavily into 80s and 90s nostalgia. And I really think this goes back to what Nicole and Jane were saying about the parents having a huge influence on what we're seeing come through for home. So this really leans into the nostalgia of the parents specifically, and it is very emotionally resonant for them as they relive their own childhood memories. So we're seeing the Slinky and these, very old school toys come through, the old school pencil sharpener, the roller skate, things like that. I really love this campaign. I love the colors. I love the toys that are being displayed here, and it really just leans into that overall sense of 80s, 90s nostalgia that we're seeing. So as you can see, there's definitely 2 sides to it. There's the more elevated side of it for the older audience, but then we're seeing the more playful side when we get into our kids' spaces.
Great. I love that there's that interplay too. And me personally, I'm a big fan of the granny look that you have on the bottom there. Blake, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, I guess we're almost at the end of time, but I can quickly add about all of the different articles that I have at the bottom. I feel like they really highlight consumer desire to seek out nostalgic decor. And like you mentioned earlier, I think consumers are really craving comfort and kind of escapism in the home. And I feel like the home is like the perfect place to hold all your memories, and therefore nostalgia is very important. And whether that's, showing up through mid-century modern remakes or heirloom pieces, I think they all kind of help people maybe romanticize their life and reflect on fonder memories that can provide comfort in the moment. So these articles are really fun to kind of deep dive in and see what they kind of highlight that's nostalgic.
All right. And like you said, we're at time, but before we leave, I just wanted to like pose one more question to everybody. Feel free to pass or, give us your answer later. But, if we fast forward 10 years from now, what is there any piece of new or current property right now that you think is going to define, like what people feel nostalgic about maybe 10 years from now? Anyone? I can start. I mean, like, I also don't have an answer to this question. Leela's the one who suggested this, so I didn't prepare anything. But for me, I feel like it's just gonna be this like slushy we have of trends. It's like, people have already talked about, with AI and all that, and just like remixing and synthesizing all this like mishmash of trends. It's like Labubu, matcha, whatever. I feel like that's kind of like what I have in my head is like just like a slurry of like pop culture references.
I feel like my head was kind of headed in the same direction too, but with music, I feel like all the artists that are kind of leaning into like the genre bending and stuff will definitely be the defining things. I feel like all the McGee hype is still very much here right now, all of the Beyonce trilogies and all of that. I feel like that's definitely something really interesting happening in music right now that I feel like people are maybe overlooking and will appreciate down the line.
I think, I definitely agree with that. I think in terms of what people will be nostalgic about in years to come from like this recent era, it's interesting that we've actually seen a lot of consumers express nostalgia for lockdown during the pandemic. I see this quite a lot on TikTok and Twitter. And basically, people are nostalgic for a time when they had to focus like inward or they were walking or doing hobbies. And so obviously, it was a very scary, stressful, horrible time. But a lot of people had some like this unique opportunity to grow. And so we've seen that and think definitely that will continue to influence.
I definitely agree with that kind of line of thinking where while it was happening, it was awful. We all like hated it. We didn't want to be stuck inside. We wanted to see our friends. But now that we're now like obligated to always go back out into the world all the time, so few people have the option to work from home, although luckily many of us do here. Um, and just kind of having that option to be such a homebody because now it's all about, again, like what you're putting out on social media, where you've been, what you've been seeing, like what you're experiencing and what you're doing that makes you stand out from the other people around you because we're not all forced again to like stay at home and stay low key anymore.
I'm really unsure what we're gonna feel nostalgic about in 10 years' time, but what I do know is I don't think we have to wait 10 years to feel nostalgic about today. Because I remember even like years and years and years ago, the whole like romanticizing 2016 thing was already happening on TikTok. And it's really interesting how it seems like with social media, everything's so sped up that we almost don't have the opportunity to even live through the moment before we start, romanticizing it and longing for it, which is really interesting. So I'm sure that we'll be talking about in 2, 3 years' time about, all of the Beyonce Renaissance outfits like it was 15 years ago. Bit of a time warp, but still interesting to see what's gonna come up. Exactly, nostalgic for nostalgia. I've just seen in the comments.
All right. I think that's a great note to leave us on. Thank you all for staying late and again going along with us on this journey. Let us know what you think, and we'll be sending out a recording shortly. So have a great day.